He walked in carrying a duffel bag that had seen better decades, and a 7-year-old girl sleeping against his shoulder, like she weighed nothing, because to him, she didn't. The Hargrove Grand lobby glittered around the marble floors, chandelier light pooling gold on everything it touched. Everything except him. The receptionist's fingers moved across her keyboard without looking up. Sorry, we're fully booked. He slid the confirmation email across the counter. She still didn't look up. The little girl stirred, blinked at the woman behind the desk, with the slow, honest eyes of someone too young to know she should pretend not to notice, and asked quietly, "Did she not like us?" Nobody answered, but a woman sitting alone in the corner laptop, open tea untouched, set down what she was holding, and looked up for the first time all evening. What happened next would cost someone everything, and it started with a booking log no one was supposed to pull. Ray Calloway had driven 4 hours through October rain to get here. He hadn't stopped for food, hadn't stopped for coffee, had stopped exactly once at a gas station outside of Maplewood, because Penny needed the restroom, and because the windshield wipers on his truck had been doing something unsettling since the highway. A sound like a playing card caught in a bicycle spoke rhythmic and wrong. He'd fixed it in the parking lot in under 7 minutes, hands already cold, and then gotten back in the car without saying anything about it. That was the kind of man Ray Calloway was. He fixed things quietly and kept moving. He had booked the Hargrove Grand 3 weeks ago, not because it was his kind of place. It was emphatically not his kind of place, but because it was 4 blocks from Hargrove Children's Medical Center, and the appointment was at 8 in the morning, and he was not going to be late. The confirmation email was printed folded twice and tucked into the breast pocket of his flannel shirt, alongside a different piece of paper, a smaller one, the edges worn soft from being opened and refolded too many times. A medical schedule, appointment dates, times, names of doctors he had learned to pronounce. He didn't take that one out at the hotel. He never took that one out in front of Penny. The lobby smelled like cedar and something floral he couldn't name. A pianist somewhere was playing something slow and deliberate, the notes falling like they had somewhere important to be. Ray stood at the front desk with Penny's weight warm against his neck, her small fist still curled around the strap of her bare backpack, even in sleep, and waited. The receptionist, her name tag read. Brenda had not looked up since he approached. Her fingers moved with the efficiency of someone performing a task they consider beneath them, and her expression was the particular kind of neutral that takes active effort to maintain. "I have a reservation," Ray said. His voice was level. It was always level. "Calloway, check in for tonight." Brenda's fingers paused. She typed something. Then she said, still not looking up, "Sorry, we're fully booked." Ray set the confirmation email on the counter. The paper made a small, flat sound against the marble. "I booked 3 weeks ago. I have a confirmation number." Brenda glanced at the paper, the way someone glances at a receipt they didn't ask for, then looked back at her screen. "There may have been a system error, sir. We have no availability tonight." Ray put his second piece of paper on the counter, the credit card receipt time-stamped 22 days ago. He didn't say anything else. He just left both papers there and waited, because he had learned that waiting sometimes did what words could not. In the corner of the lobby, half hidden behind the arrangement of a high-backed sofa and a column of pale marble, a woman sat with a laptop open and a cup of tea going cold beside her. She was 36, though she looked both younger and older, depending on the angle younger, in the way that people who have spent years being underestimated sometimes look, and older in the way that people who have spent years carrying things alone sometimes look. Her name was Vivian Holt, though no one in this lobby knew that yet, and she was here because a story had broken 3 days ago about a business decision. She'd made a restructuring of the supply chain for 3 of her properties in the Northeast, and the coverage had been relentless and inaccurate and exhausting, and she had needed somewhere to be still for 48 hours without a camera pointed at her face. She had chosen this hotel specifically because it was not one of hers, or so she had thought. Her laptop screen glowed, but her eyes were on the man at the front desk. She had noticed him the moment he walked in, not because he was remarkable in any way that the Hargrove Grand was designed to reward, but because of the way he carried the child. There was no performance in it, no self-consciousness. Just a man with a sleeping girl against his shoulder, moving through a room that wanted him to feel small, refusing to feel small. Vivian had spent 15 years learning how to walk into rooms that wanted her to feel small. She recognized the posture. She watched Brenda not look at his papers. She watched the line of Ray's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. She watched Penny sleep through all of it, one small fist still holding onto that backpack strap, like even unconscious, she knew better than to let go. The manager arrived from somewhere in the back. Derek Foss, his name tag said, and his expression said the rest. He had the smooth, practiced warmth of a man who had learned to smile at people while meaning the opposite, and he deployed it now in Ray's direction with the confidence of someone who had never once been on the wrong side of that smile. "Mr. Calloway," he said, as though they were old acquaintances. "I understand there's been some confusion." He folded his hands on the counter. "Unfortunately, your room was part of a system double-booking situation. We've had to honor the prior reservation, but I'd be happy to recommend several other properties in the area." "I booked first," Ray said. "I have a receipt dated 3 weeks ago." Derek glanced at the papers on the counter with the same expression Brenda had used, not quite a look, more like an acknowledgement that something existed, and said, "I understand, and I apologize for the inconvenience. But our system—" "Your system took my credit card 3 weeks ago," Ray said, still level, still quiet. Penny stirred against his shoulder, and Ray shifted his weight slightly instinctively the way you adjust, without thinking when something precious is close to something that could hurt it. Penny opened her eyes. She had the particular talent of waking into full consciousness without the gradual transition most people needed. One moment asleep, the next, entirely present, taking in the lobby, the marble, the chandelier, the woman behind the counter, who still had not looked directly at either of them. She looked at Brenda for a long moment, with the calm, unfiltered assessment of a 7-year-old who had spent enough time in waiting rooms to have learned how to read adults quickly and accurately. Then she asked in the clear, carrying voice of a child who doesn't yet know how to modulate for social comfort, "Did she not like us?" The question landed in the lobby the way a stone lands in still water, a small sound, followed by the kind of silence that expands. Ray said quietly, "Bug." That was all. It wasn't a correction exactly, more like an acknowledgement that she had said something true, and that the truth was going to go unanswered. In the corner, Vivian Holt set her phone face down on the cushion beside her. She had been holding it without realizing. She looked at the man at the counter, at the child on his shoulder, and something shifted in her expression that she would have been difficult to describe. Not pity, which she was too pragmatic for, and not outrage, which she was too controlled for. Something quieter than either. She did not move. But she did not look away. Ray picked up both papers from the counter, folded them, and put them back in his pocket. He said, "I want the name of your general manager, in writing." His voice had not changed in volume or tone, but something behind it had a pressure contained and deliberate, like a door held shut against wind. Derek began to say something, and Ray said it again. In writing. Penny had gone very still on his shoulder. She was looking at her father's face with an expression Ray would not see, until later, when he thought about this night, the expression of a child noticing for the first time that her father was a person who could be pushed up against something and not break, and also a person who very much did not want to be pushed. Then Ray looked at his daughter. He looked at the way she was watching him. He exhaled slowly through his nose. "Never mind," he said, and the two words were the most controlled thing he had said all evening. He picked up the duffel bag. He walked toward the door. In the corner, Vivienne was already reaching for her phone. She dialed a number she didn't have saved, because she didn't need to save it. She had called it enough times that her hands knew it. When the line connected, she said without preamble, "Pull the booking log for tonight." All of it. Then she hung up and looked at the door, through which Ray Calloway had just walked, and the rain that was still falling beyond it. There were no rooms. That was the short version, and the long version wasn't much better. The first motel was full, a regional sales conference. The woman at the desk said apologetic and genuine about it. The second motel was full for the same reason, which was when Ray understood. It wasn't bad luck, but arithmetic. 400 people at a convention center 3 blocks away, and only so many beds in a mile radius. The third place had one room smoking with a broken heat register, and Ray stood at the door and smelled it, and said no without going in. He sat in the truck in the third parking lot with the engine running for warmth, and looked at his phone. The bank app was open. He had enough, just enough in the particular way that just enough always felt like standing on one foot on a step that was slightly too narrow. He called his brother-in-law, who had always been good in logistics situations. The line rang 5 times and went to voicemail. He called again. Same result. He put the phone in the cup holder and looked at the rain on the windshield and thought about the appointment at 8 in the morning, the name of the specialist written in the pocket of his flannel shirt, and the fact that Penny was coughing again, softly in her sleep, the way she sometimes did when the weather changed too fast. He started driving. He didn't know toward what exactly, just away from the parking lot. Penny woke up 10 minutes later in the way she always woke up, suddenly completely already asking a question. "Where are we going, Daddy?" "I don't know yet, Penny." The words came out shorter than he intended, clipped by something he didn't have the space to process right now. "Just sleep." Penny turned her face toward the window. She didn't say anything. She was good at not saying things, which was not a quality Ray wanted a 7-year-old to have, and which she had acquired anyway, through some combination of nature and circumstance that he tried not to think about too precisely. He saw her face in the rearview mirror, not upset exactly, just adjusted, making the small internal recalibration that children make when they understand that the adult in the room is holding more than they can show. Ray pulled over. He turned around in the driver's seat so he was looking at her directly, at the dark circles under her eyes that never fully went away, at the bare backpack she still held in her lap, at the careful way she had composed her face into something neutral to protect him. "Hey," he said. "I'm sorry. We're going to find a good place, okay, I promise." Penny nodded, once small and sincere. She didn't say it was okay. She never said things were okay when they weren't, which was another quality he'd wanted her not to develop, and which she had anyway, and which he both admired and quietly grieved. He turned back to the wheel and kept driving. The coffee shop was 24 hours and had the particular amber warmth of places designed to feel like shelter. Low-lighting mismatched chairs, the smell of dark roast and old wood. Ray ordered black coffee and a hot chocolate for Penny, who was awake now and solemn and dragging her bare backpack along the floor by one strap. He found a table in the corner, Penny climbing into the chair across from him and wrapping both hands around her mug like it was something she'd been looking for. The woman came in 7 minutes later. She had her jacket collar turned up and moved quickly, like someone who knew how to enter a room without drawing attention, which was interesting because she also had the kind of presence that drew attention regardless. She was younger than she'd looked in the lobby, or maybe the lobby had done something to her. In here, she looked like someone who had been running from something and had briefly stopped. She got to the counter, ordered something, turned around and saw him. They recognized each other at the same moment. Neither of them said anything about the hotel. She said her name, Vivienne, and he said his Ray. And that was the extent of the formal introduction, because some contexts make formality feel like the wrong tool for the work. She sat at the table next to theirs because it was the only table open. Penny looked up at her and said with the directness that was her primary mode of communication, "You have sad eyes." Vivian went very still. It was a different stillness than the composure Ray had watched her maintain in the lobby, that had been controlled stillness, the kind that cost something. This was something else, like a word she'd been about to say, getting stopped on its way out. Ray said, "That's not polite, Bug." But he didn't apologize on her behalf. Vivian noticed that. Penny accepted the correction and returned to her hot chocolate. Vivian looked at the table. Then she looked at Ray, and he looked at her. Not through her, not past her, not the evaluative scan that most people gave a stranger in the first 30 seconds. He looked at her the way someone looks when they've decided to take a thing at face value and see what comes of it. It was, she would think later, one of the more disarming things anyone had done to her in recent memory. Penny fell asleep again, with her cheek on her arm on the table, still holding the mug's handle loosely. The shop was quiet. Outside, the rain had settled into something steady and without ambition. "Why didn't you push harder?" Vivienne asked. She hadn't planned to ask it. It came out of whatever part of her bypassed the planning. At the hotel, you had documentation, you had grounds. Ray looked into his coffee. Because Penny was watching. Vivienne waited for more. There wasn't more. She turned the sentence over. Because Penny was watching. Not because he'd been afraid. Not because he'd assessed the odds and found them poor. But because his daughter was watching him choose who to be in a moment when it would have been easy to be someone else. She had sat across from executives and investors and attorneys for 15 years and heard every variety of self-justification and strategic framing, and she could not remember the last time someone had said something that was that simple and that complete. "You had leverage," she said. The words came out the way habit always does, faster than intention. You could have leverage against what Ray looked up. A night's sleep my kid won't remember. He wasn't sharp about it. He was just clear, the way people are clear when they've thought a thing through so many times that the thinking has become settled. "I'm not interested in winning a fight she gets to watch." Vivienne opened her mouth, closed it. She had a response. She had several actually good ones about the importance of standing your ground and the message that silence sends and the systems that persist because people decide not to fight them. All of it was true. She looked at Penny, asleep on her arm with the bare backpack still somehow in her grip, and she did not say any of it. She looked then without meaning to at the small scar on Penny's wrist, pale and precise, the particular linear geometry of a surgical site. Not recent, but not old either. A year, maybe 2. Her eyes moved away immediately. Ray had seen her look. He didn't say anything. The silence that followed had weight to it, not uncomfortable, but inhabited. The kind of silence two people arrive at when they've both understood something about the other that neither of them has the vocabulary to address directly. Vivienne stood to leave. She paid at the counter, and Ray watched without intending to the way she spoke to the woman at the register. Not warmly, exactly, because warmth implied effort, and this was something easier than effort. Just even. Like she expected nothing from the exchange and was willing to be surprised either way. He noticed it the way you notice something that contradicts an assumption you didn't know you'd made. She stopped at the door, turned back. Penny was still asleep, head on her arm, one small hand loosely around a mug handle. Vivienne looked at that for a moment. Then she said quietly enough that Ray wasn't entirely sure he was meant to hear it. "She's lucky." She pushed through the door before he could decide whether to answer. The message came in at 12:47 in the morning. Vivienne was sitting on the bed in her suite, not lying down, not working, just sitting, which was not a posture she occupied often, when her phone lit up with a message from the account analyst she'd called from the lobby. The booking log. All of it. She read it twice. Then she read it a third time because the first 2 times hadn't made it better. The room Ray Calloway had booked, confirmation number, credit card charge, timestamp. 22 days prior had been reallocated by Derek Foss at 9:43 that evening to a guest named Patterson, a regular, a corporate account, someone who had apparently indicated a preference for that room's view. There was no system error. There was no double booking. There was a judgment call made by a man with the authority to make it and the assumption that it would never be examined. And when Vivian pulled the thread further, when she asked her analyst to go back through the logs for the past 3 months, the pattern was not subtle. 9 instances. Rooms reallocated away from guests, with certain names, certain credit card types, certain check-in times. None of it written down anywhere. All of it legible if you knew how to read it. This hotel was not one of her properties, except that it was. She had acquired the Hargrove Group 14 months ago as part of a portfolio expansion, and the Hargrove Grand had come with it, and she had not yet conducted the operational audit she'd scheduled for the first quarter of next year. And sitting in that suite at 12:47 in the morning, she understood with the particular clarity of someone who does not often make the mistake of looking away from something true, that this was her failure too. Her phone rang. Her lead advisor, reliable, pragmatic, the kind of person who answered his phone at any hour without complaint. "Vivienne," he said, "I've seen the log. I know what you're thinking. But the timing is terrible. The restructuring story is still running, and if we open another front right now—" "I know the timing," she said. "Then you know this isn't the moment." "I know the timing," she said again, and there was something in the repetition that ended the discussion. She hung up. She looked at the booking log open on her screen. She looked at the name Ray Calloway, the timestamp 22 days ago, the appointment she didn't know about in the pocket of a flannel shirt she'd never seen. She thought about the question a 7-year-old had asked in a hotel lobby, in a voice that carried everything her father hadn't said. Did she not like us? She stood up. She put on her jacket. She took the elevator down. The lobby at 1 in the morning was different in the particular way that all public spaces are different. When most of the public has gone to bed, quieter, more itself, the performance of daytime hospitality stripped away to something more structural. 2 staff members at the desk, a security guard by the door, the pianist gone. The music replaced by a low hum from somewhere in the building's mechanical heart. Derek Foss had been called back in. He was standing behind the front desk when Vivian walked across the lobby toward him, with her keycard still in her hand, and her jacket buttoned, and her expression the kind of flat that Vivian's expression only became when she had made a decision and had stopped processing alternatives. He recognized her, the way people always recognized her. A beat late, the moment where the face catches up to the name, and the name catches up to the implications, and then the particular physiological response that follows. He went pale in the incremental visible way of someone who cannot control it. "Ms. Holt," he said, "I wasn't aware." "I know," she said. She put the booking log printout on the counter. She had printed it in her room because she believed in paper. "Explain this to me." Derek looked at the printout. He looked at it the way someone looks at a thing they had believed was safely buried. The silence stretched. Brenda, 2 feet to his left, had gone entirely still in the way of someone who understands that the ground has shifted and is waiting to learn the new shape of it. Neither of them said anything. The silence was its own answer, and Vivian had learned early in her career that you did not fill a silence that was already saying what you needed to hear. She had not raised her voice. She had not needed to. There was a quality to authority when it was completely settled. In itself, it didn't require volume, didn't require gesture. The room around her had simply recalibrated the way rooms did toward the thing with the most gravity. The front door opened. The security guard nodded. Ray Calloway walked in holding a small pink jacket, Penny's the one with the bears on the buttons left behind on the luggage cart 3 hours ago. He walked to the front desk, said, "My daughter left this," accepted it from the rack where it had been placed, thanked the desk staff by name. From their name tags, a specific small courtesy. The kind of thing you do when you've spent enough time being invisible that you've learned to see the people others overlook and turn to leave. He saw Vivian. He saw Derek Foss standing motionless beside a printed document. He saw the quality of the silence in the room, and he understood it the way a man who has spent his life reading machinery understands when something has been running wrong and has finally been stopped. He looked at Vivienne for a moment. Then he looked at his daughter's jacket in his hand. Then he nodded, not to her exactly, or not only to her, and walked to the door. She followed him out. He was standing on the step under the overhang, the rain still falling in the street beyond. He heard her come up behind him, and he stopped, but he didn't turn around immediately. When he did, she was standing in the rain at the bottom of the step, without an umbrella, and something about that, the absence of the umbrella, the fact that she'd walked into the rain without accounting for it, was different from everything else he'd seen of her tonight, which had been a woman who accounted for everything. "You didn't have to do that," he said. Vivian looked at him. "I know." Ray nodded. He looked at the jacket in his hands, small pink bears on the buttons. He looked back at her. She was standing in the rain, and her hair was getting wet, and she wasn't moving, and he had the sudden strange sense that she had been standing in rain a long time in ways that had nothing to do with weather. "Is she okay?" Vivian said. It came out before she'd organized it into something more defensible. "Penny, is she?" "She's okay," Ray said. "She's tough." He paused. "She's tougher than she looks." The rain fell between them. Vivienne looked down at her own hand, where the rain was landing on her knuckles and running off. She realized her hand was trembling slightly, not from cold. She made a fist quietly and let it go. "Good," she said. It was not adequate. She knew it wasn't adequate. She said it anyway, because she didn't have anything larger to offer in the direction of the truth, and she had learned a long time ago that the inadequate true thing was worth more than the adequate false one. Ray looked at her one more time. Something in his expression shifted, not softer exactly, more like a door that had been locked from the outside being unlocked from the inside. Then he put Penny's jacket over his arm and walked toward the parking structure, and the rain closed around him. Vivienne stood on the step. Her hand had stopped trembling. She looked at her palm open now, and the rain was cold and steady, and she did not go back inside for a long time. By morning, the story had gotten out. It hadn't come from Vivian. Her advisor confirmed this somewhat defensively, but from a staff member who had been present in the lobby at 1 a.m, and who had apparently told someone who had told someone else, with the efficiency that information moves when it has the particular quality of truth made visible. The coverage was not what her advisor had feared. It was in his words when he called at 7:15, actually playing well, the story that had framed her as coldly corporate, now complicating itself with the image of a CEO standing in hotel lobby rain at midnight over a booking log. He sounded almost relieved, and Vivian listened to him explain why this was strategically useful, and then she said, "I didn't do it for strategy." And she heard him pause and recalibrate, and she hung up. Derek Foss was placed on administrative leave pending a full operational review. Brenda was transferred to administrative duties at a different property. Vivienne called her operations director and scheduled the audit she had delayed, and then she sat down with her coffee in the suite and looked at the rain still coming down outside the window and thought about leverage. She had spent 15 years learning to see everything as leverage, not cynically, or not only cynically, but practically, because that was what you needed to survive the rooms she'd had to survive in. Every relationship was a variable, every interaction a potential resource. It had served her. It had cost her things she hadn't fully tabulated, but it had served her. She thought about Ray Calloway saying leverage against what in a 24-hour coffee shop at midnight, the complete settled clarity of it. And she thought about the ways she had spent years acquiring instruments to play music she had forgotten she was trying to make. She opened her laptop. She stared at the screen. She closed the laptop. Ray had declined the room she'd arranged for him through the front desk. She'd found this out at 6 in the morning when the night manager reported it. He had found a motel 2 blocks over. He had paid for it himself. She thought about that, and about what it would have meant to her once, and about what it meant to her now. And the distance between the two felt like something she hadn't known was a distance. The envelope arrived at her suite at 8:45 left at the front desk by a man and a small girl before the medical center appointment. Her name on the front in a child's handwriting, the letters large and carefully formed the way children write when they know something is important and are using their best. Inside was a piece of paper torn from a coloring book, the back of a page depicting a cartoon fish. On the white side in crayon, 3 figures standing under rain, one holding an umbrella that stretched wide enough to cover the other 2. Below the drawing in the same careful script, "Thank you for the sad eyes." Vivienne read it 3 times. She sat with it. She did not understand exactly what Penny had meant, whether it was gratitude for being seen or for seeing, or some child logic about the value of sadness that she hadn't arrived at yet. But she kept the paper. She folded it twice, the way important things are folded, and put it in the interior pocket of her jacket. The lobby in the morning was a different country than the lobby the night before. Light came through the high windows at a low angle and found the dust in the air and the grain in the marble and the way the chandelier dispersed into 100 small ordinary refractions rather than one grand pooling. It was objectively the same room. It was not the same room. Ray came through the front door at 9:23, with Penny running ahead of him, her bare backpack bouncing with each step, her face doing something it hadn't done last night, open unsettled in the good way, like a window that's just been unlatched. The appointment had gone well, not fixed. It was not the kind of thing that got fixed, but the numbers had moved in the right direction, and the specialist had said, "Good trajectory," twice, and Ray had written both instances down in the margin of the medical schedule in his breast pocket, because evidence mattered when the nights got long. Vivienne was standing near the entrance, not in the lobby proper, not at the front desk, but near the door, as though she'd positioned herself at the edge of a decision she hadn't fully made. She had no phone in her hand, no jacket. She looked like someone who had gotten up that morning and kept not leaving. Penny saw her first because Penny always saw things first. She changed direction without apparent deliberation, running straight to Vivienne, the way children run toward things that interested them before they've learned that interest requires permission. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, looking up at Vivienne with the same clear assessment she had used in the coffee shop. Vivienne crouched down to Penny's level, a motion that Ray noticed she did without any of the awkward calculation of adults who weren't used to children just down level present. "Better than I expected," she said. "That's good," Penny said with the gravity of an expert. "Sleep is important." She had been told this by approximately every doctor she had ever visited, and had apparently integrated it into her worldview as universal fact. Ray stopped beside them. He and Vivienne looked at each other in the sideways calibrating way of people who have been through something together without agreeing to, and are now deciding what it means. The morning light came through the front windows, and it was a different kind of light than the chandelier had been, less beautiful, more honest, the kind that shows you things as they actually are. "How is she doing?" Vivienne asked. Her voice had a quality that distinguished it from social inquiry, something quieter and more serious underneath. "She's tougher than she looks," Ray said, which was what he'd said the night before, but it landed differently in the morning in the light. He watched something move across Vivienne's face, not a smile exactly. Something more careful, then a smile. "I think I know where she gets it," she said quietly. Not quite to him, not quite to herself. He heard it either way. Penny had found a small stone on the floor near the entrance. Smooth gray, the kind of river stone that turns up in city lobbies, on the soles of shoes, unremarkable and specific. She picked it up and presented it to Vivienne with both hands, the formal seriousness of a child executing a ceremony. "For your collection," she said. "I don't have a collection," Vivienne said. Penny looked at her with the patient expression of someone correcting a misapprehension. "You do now." Ray laughed. It was a short, unguarded sound, the kind that escapes before you've decided to allow it, the first genuinely unguarded thing he'd done in 2 days. Vivienne looked at him when he laughed. She looked at him the way you look at something you've been trying to understand from a distance and have suddenly understood from close up. He reached into his jacket pocket. Found a pen, found a receipt, the same gas station receipt from the night before, the one from the Maplewood stop. He wrote on the back of it, folded it once, and held it out to her. "In case Penny wants to add to your collection," he said, "if she finds any more important rocks." Vivienne took the paper. She looked at the number written there. She looked up, and Ray had already turned toward the door, crouching down to tell Penny something about the car and the drive home, and whether she wanted music or quiet. And Penny was saying, "Music, definitely music," and the conversation was ordinary and specific and complete. The door opened. The morning came in. Penny ran through it, first bare backpack, swinging, already moving toward what came next, with the particular momentum of someone who has been given a good reason to keep going. Ray followed, and the door swung closed behind them, and the lobby was briefly rearranged. Vivienne stood at the entrance with the stone in one hand and the folded receipt in the other. Her phone began to ring her advisor the name on the screen, and she looked at it, and looked at the door, and let it ring. Outside through the glass, she could see Ray getting Penny settled in the truck patient, and unhurried the way he did everything. The truck pulled out of the drop-off lane. She watched it until it turned the corner. She looked down at the folded receipt. She had not opened it again. She didn't need to. She had the number. She had read it. It was in her. Somewhere. She had not called it. She had not deleted it. The stone was cold and smooth in her palm, an ordinary weight small enough to hold without thinking about it, which was maybe the point of small things, that you carried them without noticing, until one day you noticed, and by then they'd already become part of how your hand understood what it was holding. She turned back toward the lobby. The chandelier was just a chandelier in the morning. The marble was just a floor. The advisor would call again. He always did. There were decisions waiting audits to schedule a story still circulating that required management and response. All of it was real, and all of it would be handled, and all of it could wait for a few more minutes, while she stood at the entrance of a hotel that was hers without her having known it, and held a rock a 7-year-old had picked up off the floor, and thought about what it meant to see something clearly, and what it cost to look away. She didn't look away. She put the stone in her jacket pocket alongside the folded drawing with its crayon umbrella and its careful letters, and she walked back into the morning.